Today we're going to be talking about, as you know, BlackRock's secret attack on Bitcoin, right? So take us through the timeline of events.
Yeah, so essentially the largest asset manager in the world, BlackRock, has just came out and announced they're going to file for a Bitcoin spot ETF. Obviously, the world's very bullish about this. Everybody in the Bitcoin space is very optimistic. And I've kind of written a few different tweet threads and recorded a few different videos saying, hey, look, hang on a minute, let's slow down. I actually think this could pose a secret attack on Bitcoin. And obviously, when I say that, most people think I'm crazy and, a little bit conspiratorial, so to say. But there's really interesting wording in that BlackRock ETF filing that's really making me pay attention. On the 24th page of the Bitcoin ETF filing, BlackRock has a really interesting section where they say if there is a hard fork of Bitcoin in the future, we actually don't need to follow the most economic and most valuable chain of Bitcoin. And naturally, everyone in the Bitcoin space is like, hey, that's really weird. Why are they even talking about a hard fork, firstly? But then why are they talking about following the non-economic chain in regards to Bitcoin? Because for years, people have speculated, okay, a nation state might attack Bitcoin. They might try to hard fork the chain, and they're going to continue to mine on the non-economic chain and try to force a hard fork that way. So most people would be aware, BlackRock is also the world's largest ESG manager. So for anyone who doesn't know, ESG stands for the environment, society, and governance. So BlackRock has been forcing the hand, that's Larry Fink's own words, forcing the hand of companies to not invest in companies that are bad for the environment, bad for society, or bad for governance, quote unquote. So obviously BlackRock has had this agenda against Bitcoin and even oil companies for years because they're quote unquote bad for the environment. They use too much energy, too much electricity. So that's firstly the first big red flag that I noticed. And then that's when I really, slammed the tinfoil hat on and I started diving down the rabbit hole. And I noticed that this timing of the BlackRock ETF filing comes at a really, really, really interesting timing. So for the first little couple of months in 2023, in the United States, we saw Operation Choke Point 2.0, where all of the Bitcoin and quote-unquote crypto-related banks were debanked. So we actually saw the controlled demolition of Silicon Valley Bank and Silvergate Bank, who serviced all of the Bitcoin and crypto companies in the space. So the entire Bitcoin industry essentially got debanked in early 2023. I should correct myself. It was the entire crypto industry. Many of the Bitcoin-only companies still have access to the banks, which is an interesting tidbit that I'm sure we can get into later, a little bit later on in the pod. But feel free to stop me whenever. I know I can ramble and rant for a long time, my friend. You probably know that. I've given you a few ear bashings over the years. But so anyway, we had Operation Choke Point 2.0 early 2023. And then the World Economic Forum came out and released a 35-page white paper on May 25th. So let's remember, that was only 2 weeks before the SEC came out and sued Binance and Coinbase on June 5th and June 6th. And then obviously the week after then, we get this BlackRock Bitcoin ETF filing after we've destroyed all of the Bitcoin and crypto banks in the United States and we've sued the two largest exchanges in the United States. So it's almost as if the US and the regulators are trying to remove all of the other options out of the market and force people into only using a potential BlackRock ETF. Now, BlackRock hasn't actually had this ETF approved yet, but I believe they're an absolute shoo-in. BlackRock is one of the most connected institutions in the world. They've filed for 576 different ETFs in their lifetime or history, and they've been approved 575 times. So there's a 99.86% chance this BlackRock Bitcoin ETF gets approved. But those weren't the only the events that have transpired in the past 2 weeks when we have this really condensed window of events happening in the past month. You have the WEF in late May, we get the SEC, we get the BlackRock ETF, but then last week, the Bank of International Settlements came out and said, we need a globally unified central bank digital currency ledger. And they said on this centralized ledger, we are going to actually try to tokenize assets, and we're essentially going to try to convert everybody's cash to CBDC tokens. And the only way that you can actually pay your mortgages and your debts on these tokenized assets is with our approved CBDC token. So essentially, if you have a mortgage or a car loan, the BIS is talking about a transition where all of your loans are tokenized on this CBDC ledger. So this is the BIS talking about this on, I believe it was June 20th. So the day after the BlackRock ETF filing. Then 2 days after that, the IMF came out, another big monetary institution. And they were also talking about the idea of creating this interoperable central bank digital currency system. And I believe we also had the FATF, which is the Financial Action Task Force, or whatever they call themselves. They came out with a blueprint as well in June 23 or 24. I forget the exact date. My memory's not that good. But they also came out and said we need to regulate crypto and we need global cooperation. So for those keeping score at home, there's about 6 different very interesting events happening in the past 25 days that are all coming from your monetary institutions and gatekeepers, such as the WEF, the FATF, the BIS, the IMF, and there was one in there I forgot, but yeah, the SEC. So you got 5 of your alphabet soup gatekeepers all coming out and attacking Bitcoin and the crypto industry in the past 25 odd days. So I'll pause there for a minute because that was a lot, but I believe it's all happening here at the G, as we would say in Australia.
So you think there's obviously a pretty high chance of this getting approved, but what type of ETF is it? Is it a spot-backed ETF or is it a so-called paper-backed ETF?
This is just like a spot Bitcoin ETF. So you're going to have shares that are actually redeemable, and they're created on a regular occurrence. So that's very different to Grayscale, where you actually have to buy those Grayscale shares and they're locked up for 6 months. That's more of like a trust structure. So this Grayscale ETF is much more like a spot Bitcoin ETF.
So where's this all heading for Bitcoin? What does this all mean?
So I believe, obviously they're attacking us because they're taking us seriously. That's why I believe they are attacking us. The entire world looks to be adopting Bitcoin at a breakneck pace. In Nigeria, they tried to roll out central bank digital currencies. They even tried to remove everybody's bank accounts in Nigeria. Anybody who serviced a Bitcoin exchange in Nigeria was completely debanked. Anybody with more than $100 in Nigerian nairas sit in the bank had all of that instantly converted to CBDCs. The everyday people couldn't remove more than $100 out of the bank ATM every month. So they really tried to push central bank digital currencies in Nigeria. But their local CBDC only has 0.35% adoption in the population, and Bitcoin is rumored to have somewhere between 30 to 40% adoption in the country, despite there being no exchanges. So obviously we're watching countries all around the world try to roll out CBDCs, and you kind of have lots of examples around the world, such as Nigeria, where people have been debanked. And another great one is Lebanon. If you had any money in the bank in Lebanon 2 years ago, you've lost 98% of it through capital controls, devaluation, etc., etc. So that's why people are literally mining Bitcoin with S9s in their basement in Lebanon just to try to pay for groceries. So I believe the state is scared. That's why they're coming after Bitcoin. And that's why I've kind of put this hypothetical thesis out there to say, hey, look, this is a potential attack vector that we need to watch. I don't know if this is an attack vector. Could just be explained simply by Occam's razor. Maybe BlackRock's just getting lots of their investors saying, look, we want to invest in Bitcoin. Can you, allow us to invest in Bitcoin? It could just be that kind of explanation. But, I believe the whole Operation Choke Point 2.0, the collapse of FTX, I believe it was all like a big controlled demolition to kind of slow down the price of Bitcoin in 2022, to let these institutions like BlackRock, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, Bank of America, to all race in there and buy up Bitcoin on the cheap. The charts have shown there's huge spot demand for Bitcoin over the past 6 months, despite it being in this quote unquote bear market. And since March of 2020, you've actually seen something really weird happen for the first time in Bitcoin's life, and that's coins are actually leaving the exchanges. So for the first 12 years of Bitcoin's life between 2008 and 2020, you only ever saw Bitcoins being sent to exchanges. So the exchange balance was rising. And that was because people didn't understand Bitcoin. They were mining Bitcoin. They were sending it to exchanges to exchange it for paper fiat. They were taking their profits and buying a Lambo. But all of a sudden, something really strange happened in March of 2020. the amount of coins peaked out on exchanges at 3.1 million Bitcoin. And today there's less than 2.1 million Bitcoins sitting on exchanges for sale. So over the past 3 years, we've had this extraordinarily volatile Bitcoin price action, but 35% of the available Bitcoins for sale has evaporated off exchanges, and we don't know where those Bitcoins have gone. So, I've been theorizing for a long time that these Bitcoins are being bought by nation states. They're being bought by publicly traded companies, in particular privately traded companies, because they're probably a little bit more flexible with their treasuries. Publicly traded companies are bound to much more clarity, and they have to tell people what they're buying. But I believe it's nation states are stacking the dip, and it's institutions like BlackRock have been aggressively accumulating Bitcoin since March of 2020. Again, that's just a speculation, but the data is not a speculation. 1 million coins have left exchanges over the past 3 years. If that trend continues, there's no Bitcoin on exchanges in 2028. So I believe the state is threatened by all of this broader picture that I just painted. And there's a potential that this BlackRock ETF could be the quote unquote final boss, as I've actually called it in a few recent videos and threads.
So one thing I want to talk about is a potential attack vector on Bitcoin, right? So you're talking about before, I think you said the IMF is creating these payment rails where all assets will be tokenized within a distributed ledger. Let's not call it a blockchain. It's probably a distributed ledger, which is just smart marketing for saying a completely centralized blockchain, which in proof of stake is generally centralized anyway. But what's to stop, say, a tokenized version of Bitcoin appearing onto this ledger and that becoming the essential government-approved Bitcoin and discouraging people away from Bitcoin?
Yeah, so this is going to be the plan. This is exactly what I believe is going to happen. It's funny, the BIS, they're not even mincing their words. They're not even slapping some sexy salad dressing on their recent central bank digital currency announcement. They've come out and said this is a centralized ledger. This is not a distributed ledger at all. This is centralized, and we're the gatekeepers, which is Orwellian, and people are still eating it up. But yeah, so I believe this is the attack vector with Bitcoin. If you're going to try to kill Bitcoin, you need to kill the things that make Bitcoin valuable. So why is Bitcoin valuable? It has a finite supply. You can't change the rules. That's a very big piece, and it's absolutely decentralized. And all of those are backed up by one thing, and that's proof of work. The fact that Bitcoin is proof of work is what ensures those valuable characteristics of Bitcoin aren't actually changed. So I believe BlackRock is actually going to try to change Bitcoin from proof of work to proof of stake through some sort of hard fork. And like they said in the wording in the document, they have no obligation to follow the most valuable or the most sensible chain, because Bitcoin has hundreds of thousands of nodes distributed all around the world. Most people are obviously going to vote to follow the Bitcoin with 21 million and the version of Bitcoin that uses proof of work. So under this hypothetical scenario, BlackRock is probably going to create a proof of stake friendly version of Bitcoin, and they're going to maybe, obviously try to enforce KYC, all of the things that you're very scared about being implemented on the Bitcoin main chain, KYC, all the CBDC crap. So I believe that's the plan, and it's not just BlackRock being the world's largest ESG manager that really makes me pop on the tinfoil hat again, so to say, because Bitcoin's proof of work has been under attack very recently and very regularly. So something else I laid out in the video was in April 2022, we obviously had that enormous Greenpeace initiative. It was called Change the Code, where they tried to change Bitcoin's code from proof of work to proof of stake. So Ripple's co-founder, Jeremy Larson, I believe is his name. He is obviously, he's a Ripple co-founder. So he believes that, he's fudded Bitcoin for years, saying it uses too much energy. Come look at my, eco-friendly proof of stake Ripple coin. We're way better. So he actually bribed Greenpeace $5 million to actually, write this hit piece and come along with this Change the Code campaign for Bitcoin. And it was really interesting. They created this big skull, and it had dirty coal plants on top of the skull, and they made it out of Bitcoin mining computers, and they put it on the back of the truck, and they drove it through America and everywhere, and they tried to say, look at how dirty Bitcoin is. It's killing the planet. So, like, I mean, this was happening in April, right? April 2023. Then 1 month later, Sleepy Joe Biden came out from his slumber, and he said, we're going to impose a 30% mining tax on all these Bitcoin companies in America. So attack 1 with Greenpeace, attack 2 with Sleepy Joe, attack number 3 came out recently with, I've lost it. I lost my train of thought. There's another one. The World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum came out with a really interesting video around a month ago as well. And they actually interviewed a guy from, what's his name? Crusoe Energy. So this is a Bitcoin mining company. And they were kind of in this 2-minute little documentary style video. The World Economic Forum is showing how data centers are actually good for the planet, because these data centers are capturing all of this wasted energy and they're using it to, mine data. But they didn't actually say Bitcoin in this whole little 2-minute propaganda video they did. They just said data centers are good for the environment. So lots of alarm bells have been kind of going off surrounding Bitcoin and its proof of work energy recently. I just remembered what I was going to mention before I had a brain fart. And that was the Wall Street Journal. So the Wall Street Journal is one of the largest publications in the world. And they ran this hit piece in May 2022. It was titled something like The Real World Costs of Bitcoin. And they said, Bitcoin's polluting the planet. It's killing the planet. And they, obviously they're a very powerful legacy institution from in the industrial age, not so much today in the information age. But they have connections to everybody's favorite Bill Gates and the World Economic Forum. I actually dug up a little receipt. The former editor, the former editor-in-chief at the Wall Street Journal was actually on the World Economic Forum's board of advisors, which is really interesting. And something else that's interesting is BlackRock is a contributing partner at the World Economic Forum, and Larry Fink is on the board at the World Economic Forum. And they've obviously had a history for many years of hating Bitcoin. So even in the past 2 months, Bitcoin proof of work mining has been absolutely under attack. And then the largest ESG asset manager in the world comes out and announces they're going to create a Bitcoin ETF, and they're going to, and they can do what they want in terms of forking Bitcoin and following the uneconomic chain. So alarm bells are everywhere, and I could be a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. I would love the listener to tell me why in the comments down below. I love hate mail. You can send it my way. So yeah, what do you think, Fitzy? Do you think there's too many dots being connected here, or?
Look, I think someone would very reasonably call you a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, and as they would call me a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. One thing I want to throw back at you is a bit of a curveball, which is, I love the hat. I want to ask you the question about, so considering they're building these payment rails, right? What's going to, essentially, if someone still chooses to use Bitcoin on the main chain or Lightning or whatever, through KYC, won't Bitcoin need some privacy solutions to, I suppose, negate that problem? Otherwise, you're just leaving it wide open for the attack of the users on the actual network and incentivizing everyone to go to the government railed network.
Yeah, 100%. We have examples of companies like Chainalysis trying to partner up with companies in the Bitcoin space like Lightning Labs. So this is something else I'm making a video on this week. Obviously, the World Economic Forum has that connection with Lightning Labs, and they're one of the largest Lightning companies. Yes, I think it is a threat that, KYC and tracking on the Bitcoin base chain is doable. And that's why you're watching all of these layer 2 and layer 3s pop up that I believe will solve any privacy or KYC problems Bitcoin has down the road. So Lightning isn't fully private. But if you're a receiver on Lightning, you've got pretty good privacy 99.9% of the time. I'm a technical dumbass. That's my understanding of it. If you're sending Bitcoin on Lightning, you're not as private. But again, Lightning is more private than the Bitcoin base chain. So it's an improvement, and it's obviously far more scalable. And there's solutions like Lightning factories that's going to actually make opening Lightning channels and closing Lightning channels far more scalable and fixes a lot of the problems with Lightning. Because Lightning has a lot of problems, okay? Lightning's been around for 6 or 7 years. Yes, nation states are using Lightning today. That's how El Salvador's implementing Bitcoin legal tender, but there still has many issues. So that's why you're watching other Bitcoin layer 2s and layer 3s pop up. There's a really interesting solution called Fedimints. It's more like a very centralized version of like a federation where you can create a local bank and you essentially have like 100% privacy within that local bank, because you're not trading Bitcoin itself. What you're doing is you're taking your Bitcoin to the Federation, and they're like minting you an eCash token that's obviously pegged to the price of Bitcoin. So obviously, I get it; it's not real Bitcoin, not your keys, not your coins. It's centralized. I get it, but it's a great solution, so to say, that's actually fully private. So Fedi mints are incredibly private, and eCash is a really interesting solution that has been talked about since the 1990s. And then obviously we have another layer 2 or 3 that popped up recently. It was actually announced at the Bitcoin Miami Conference 2023, and that puppy was called ARK. Again, I'm a technical dumbass, so I haven't really dived down that rabbit hole. But ARK looks to be the most promising Bitcoin layer 2 or layer 3. Everything is essentially done off chain. I believe there's some coin joining involved in there by default. So to even get the ARK token, I believe you might have to coin join a Bitcoin UTXO. And obviously, it's because it's off chain. It's apparently a lot easier and more scalable than Lightning. Because with Lightning, you still have to open up a channel to get on there, unless you use like a trusted centralized solution like a Wallet of Satoshi, or like a Moon wallet who handles all of your channel openings and closings, and balancing liquidity on the channels and all of that. So ARK is very promising, and I'm actually very bullish on it. But I'm not very well educated and versed on it yet. But I believe there are lots of solutions like that being rolled out, and even day by day, coin joins are becoming even easier to use on the Bitcoin main chain.
Anyone who's interested in following Luke further, you can catch him on Twitter at Luke Mikic21. You can also follow him on YouTube. The channel name is Money Matters. Luke, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thank you so much for putting up with my deranged rant. It's good to see you again, brother.